So, we've been hearing a lot of concepts and a lot of, endorsement that trust is important. So we're all fully convinced already. So I'm glad to have this panel here of practitioners. So they're going to share, a lot of nuggets about actually how did they go about executing trust within the organizations. So very quickly, we start with Jessie. Thoughtworks, has been helping your customers do technology innovations because you provide consulting and you develop bespoke applications for them. So maybe very quickly introduce yourself, Thoughtworks, and actually some of your experiences in helping your partners innovate.
Okay, thanks, Philip. A quick introduction for myself. So I work for Thoughtworks, a global technology consulting company, and we are headquartered in the US and have presence in 18 countries. So my current role is a global CIO, which I'm very much internal focused, managing the internal IT, serve everyone, all the functions. But in the past experience, I have been very client facing. So we've been doing a lot of bespoke software to our clients, providing consultancies about digital transformation. And certainly I have another roles as well. That's why I'm here today, because I also play a role at the SGTech as a counselor. And the other thing is for the Digital Trust Forum, because we work on the Digital Trust Committee, and I'm ExCo member, so I spend a lot of time discussing this topic in the last half a year. So that's a little bit about myself. So we talk about some innovations for clients, right? So we have been helping a lot of clients for technology innovations, but since today we are discussing about digital trust, so I have to say these years we have seen increased engagement or requirements from our customers to us related to digital trust initiatives. Especially we actually, in a few countries, we work with government and also healthcare providers. And these are the organizations really pay a lot of attention to the digital trust. I think in the past, we always have a concept about you need to build digital trust and then the security into your DNA, which means you think about a lot of traditional organizations, when they think about security, they will do a whole development process at the end. They say, okay, let's do the security auditing and do the penetration test. So everything will be at the end. So we all know the problem is then you found out some big gaps. And then you probably have to do a lot of rework, or you haven't thought enough. And then when you go live, and then you found actually it create a lot of problem for you. So we have been advocating for building the trust and then security in the whole development life cycle. And starting from the design stage, you treat it as important as you treating any software requirements and then your user need. I think the good thing is, like I mentioned, we work with some of the government agencies and also healthcare providers, because they have to handle a lot of customer data or citizens' data. And then they started having been more engaged with us to discuss those things for the whole life cycle. So for example, something we advocated for agile threat modeling, very different than the traditional threat modeling, which you have to do a lot of upfront work before you really started doing the kind of security trust related thing. But agile threat modeling will allow you to do more frequently and also do the smaller chunks, so you can do much faster. So many of the organizations doing that. So just one example for one of the clients who is doing more about healthcare services. So they work with us and we help them to do some customer privacy preserving technologies. So they can really anonymize the data, which for many of the other parties to use, because they need to use the data to derive some of the results for them to innovate. So in this way, the customer data privacy is protected. On the other side, help them to set up the governance processes. So then they can really make sure when they need to de-anonymize data, there has to be control. Because sometimes you need to know more than anonymize the data. So then those are the things we are doing. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So one of the key point that I picked up from what you're saying is actually building trust in the system right from the start. So it's like trust by design,
Yep.
which is brings me perfectly to our next speaker. Lawrence, you're from UOB, you have regional deployment, and I'm sure, building trusted applications with trust in it must be really part of your DNA when you build applications. Maybe you can just quickly share with us about yourself, your responsibilities. Actually, how does UOB, develop your applications? Because, you are the bank and we all trust your applications. Lawrence?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So Lawrence is the name. I'm the CEO for GTO. GTO is Group Technology and Operations in UOB. I also run the bank, so I'm the head of our Run the Bank group. If you think about a bank, we are in the business of trust. And when our customers entrust their financials to us, we are custodian of all their financial assets. We are custodian of all the transactions that they do, the privacy that they entrust with us, the security that they demand from us. So as a bank, and UOB operates in 19 countries, it is very important that we put trust at the center of everything that we do. Now, when we think about digital trust, it is, to me, an extension of the traditional trust that we already need to have as a bank. So when we think about some of the movements of digitalization that's happened, especially with COVID, where during that time, a lot of people cannot go to the branches, they cannot go out and mingle, they cannot shop, they gravitate towards the digital channels. In UOB, we believe that there are still going to be a group of people who still do not maybe possess the right skills to be digital. So we advocate a concept called omni-channel, right? Whatever that we practice in the branches in terms of ensuring that you are who you are, these are your assets, and these are the things that you can touch. If you are in the digital channel, it has to be the same. And if you decide that you need to talk to someone, call our call center, come to our branch, we will render you exactly the same service. So the whole omni-channel concept permeates in our banking application called Tomorrow. And to that, in order to further the trust with our customers, then we practice a concept called hyper-personalization, right? What that means is that when you are interacting with our app, we will tell you these are the insights about how you are spending, where you are spending, and where you could maximize and stretch your dollar. We offer you coupons based on your spending patterns. So we use your data to your own benefit, right? And again, that is a very, I would say, a very unique way, or maybe how we practice it. Again, we use AI technologies and all that to just understand what is the best deal for our customers when they come into our app. And again, our thinking is that we want to be extending beyond banking when you come to our app, because that is where you want to fully use your money to the maximum whenever you can. Now, as people come to our app, of course, the things that can erode trust very quickly is when you click on the app and it just spins. And then when you do a payment and you don't know whether your payment is through, the other party has received it or not. So as IT, then our job to essentially build more trust is to ensure that whatever architecture that we put in, it must be able to scale. It must have the kind of speed that our customers expect, and of course the security from a protection standpoint. Now, I do note that in digital trust, we talk about how to be transparent, how to be accountable, how to be frictionless. Now, as a bank, because we are really custodian of the customer's assets, sometimes we have to put in some friction. And again, I think the reports are out there. Cyber crimes are on the rise. How do we help our customers not fall prey to any of those scams out there? So unfortunately, while we try to make the digital experience as seamless and as frictionless as possible, we have been through some of the experiences requiring to introduce some friction. So for example, if you were to put in a new payee into your account, we would have a 12-hour cooling off period, just to make sure that if it's a scam and you realize it, no money can go out of your account until the cooling period happens, right? So I think building trust is about balancing what I call the innovation versus the risk. And of course, as a bank, the risk culture is very, very strong. And in there, we are always looking out for what is the right thing to do for our customers and not just go for innovation directly, right? So I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective of how we think about trust and how do we actually implement it in some of the things that we do. Thank you.
Thanks, Lawrence. It's very interesting you brought up this whole concept about friction and actually creating friction, because earlier this morning, Piyush in this panel, they talk about it. I'll come back to this subject matter again and get the thoughts from the other members. But let's now go down to John, right? John, is cybersecurity SAR for our Singapore government, having been in there for many years. Now that you are out there also as a senior advisor to Huawei, right? And I think Jessie earlier was talking about trust by design. So having come from the government environment, and we know that the Singapore government's procurement standard is very, very high. And also as a service provider, what are some of your thoughts on, when you are buying an application, someone giving you a trust by design, when they build the app, how is that of value to you?
So thanks, Philip. Met many friends. They asked me what am I doing. So first of all, I thought I'd say a few words about my existence. So first, I'm retired from the Singapore government for some time. I serve as advisor, board member, as a lecturer in a university, looking after grandchildren. So they're all good. Sitting here as maybe answering to Philip's is to share a bit of perspective about how we can cement ICT technology and innovation with trust in mind. As a buyer for many years, I think there's a few things we always want to ensure that the trust is embedded. Sharing some thoughts about the back history on Singapore government. Many of you probably never heard about this. In order for you to give some sense of assurance to your stakeholders, to the citizen that you know what you're doing, you first must have a plan. So many of you probably know Singapore government actually have a cybersecurity master plan or info security master plan. It actually run in series. From a first master plan to second master plan to third master plan to setting up of the CSA to have a national cybersecurity strategy. First and foremost is you need to have a master plan. And the plan need to be made known. The plan need to be assuring that all stakeholders, all parties, citizen, government, private sector, are aware about where they can actually play a role. It's a shared responsibility. When you're trying to acquire a technology, first of all, we always ask the people who want to sell. So I now ask the sell side of the house, are you aware of what is our plan? Are you familiar with our backyard, our digital asset? If you say that you don't, then I think there's a problem. So as an advisor to many of the vendors in the market, we always say that first and foremost, get to learn about your buyer's digital backyard. The digital asset is complex. As we all know, when we move more and more into digitization, the footprint becomes wider, bigger, and more complicated. And that's probably the first thing which I will always look out for, to see whether the people who wish to provide such a services into the organization, are they familiar with the so-called buyer digital backyard. So that's one and foremost. The way we, of course, look at evaluating the product has got no secret. We mask a name, we mask a vendor, we mask a price. We look at what he said. Does it do what it promised to do? Does it deliver what it able to do? Does it has a longevity? Does it has the evidence to prove that it can be done as what you have stated? Those are quite simple. Actually, in today's context, government play a big role in doing certification, doing test lab, running use cases. Those are perhaps history of the past. Can we do slightly better going forward? I'm actually very big about next generation data center and cloud. These are big, especially you want to go to digitization. Someone got to run the CPU, someone got to run the storage. You can't do it all by yourself. Now, those are the two big digital assets that most of the enterprise will want to look at, and for you to make sure that it can be trusted. How can you assure people that it can be trusted? So you have to look at additional element of trust. Is there an academic paper on trust by design? No, I've not heard yet. I only heard about security by design. Not sure in the audience how many of you are cybersecurity chief, or you are actually worried about cybersecurity. As a retired cybersecurity chief, I now don't admire those who are in the position, because you have now additional thing to think about, which is called privacy. Security and privacy becoming a more complex area, which you probably need to examine a bit deeper. Again, now I'm sitting on the buy side. If you are CISO, when you mount a question on them, you are no longer just thinking about cybersecurity, because in your mind, there's actually an embedded data privacy element. And the data become a more complex digital asset as compared to before. Does that answer to your question whether is this what the government looking for? Ask the current CISO, ask CSA, ask IMDA, maybe ask GovTech, ask the government agency, what are they looking for? I will tell you, every of the ministry, every of the government agency probably are looking for slightly different element of trust because of the way they operate their ministry or agency. Depending on the risk, depending on the digital asset, is it a secret system? Is it a public-facing system? Is it a sensitive system? And therefore, the demand may be slightly different. Can we tier the trust? I think we should. I'm not sure whether maybe in the next future study, we can look at different tier of trust. Can we trust the bank? Can we trust the cloud operator? It really depends on your appetite. Many people ask me, should I trust the cloud? I say, first, check your own digital protection level. If your cybersecurity level is not as good as a cloud, move to cloud immediately, because they gave you more. You don't even need to do it. But if you think that you have better security than the cloud operators that you are trying to move, then think twice. You probably can still depend on them, but you probably have to examine what more can you do on top of what they are providing. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Now, as an advisor to Huawei, some of you probably never heard about Huawei. I'll say two or three things about Huawei. Something in Huawei that excites me a bit is they own thousands of security patents that deal with security and privacy. Not many people take notice. From a core business of doing telco, now doing cloud, doing enterprise, doing consumer, I only take notice of one thing that the founder owners say. If this is not secure, you are not allowed to sell it. How many people will say that? I think that's quite admiring for me. And if not for anything, it's something which probably for you to examine, for companies that actually deal with the cybersecurity and privacy a little bit more holistically. I don't think many companies are doing that. And I would say Huawei is one exception. Thank you, Philip.
Thanks, John. I mean, so you talk about, you have not heard about trust by design. We all understand security by design, but obviously, you know, I think based on what Jessie has mentioned earlier, this is definitely going to be a trend. And I think one of the work for the new Center of Excellence that SGTech is going to form is to actually come out with a document about trust by design. I think that is definitely something that we need to do. So I only have time for one last question. I'm sorry, panel, I know you have a lot to share. You know, coming back to Jessie, actually I wanted to ask you about technology. But, you know, because Lawrence talked about creating friction, and actually earlier this morning, Piyush talked about creating friction, right? Purposely creating friction, right? Creating this thing that goes round and round, you know, to tell people that actually something is happening, because most of the time when we try to offer a very good service, we want it to be so fast. Before you click, it happens. So because you build applications for your customers, any thoughts about purposely creating friction for those applications?
I actually wanted to talk something a little bit different since we don't have a lot of time. I want to talk something very important, but I can comment a little bit on that. I think currently because of the technology, a lot of companies can do more AI-based friction as well. Not for everyone the same. When they see potentially there's a scam, they can introduce friction, but they don't have to introduce friction to everyone. So it can be more targeted, which is even better, right? And the other thing I want to mention is I talk a little bit about technology. I talk about the whole life cycle development process. You need to build the security in, trust in, throughout the design, development, automation, testing, everything. Now the afterthoughts. Third thing we talk about is the people. And this is the most important thing, right? No matter what technology you're using, what process you have, but if you don't have a good culture to have your people to collaborate, if you have a blaming culture, everyone say, hey, this is not my problem. If anything goes wrong, that's your problem. What I'm doing is just create a boundary between us. It's not going to work. And it's not going to help you to find the potential threat, potential gaps, because the external environment just changing. You have to be very dynamic in your thoughts about what's possible, what we should be doing. So having a collaborative culture and good trust culture is super important. So that's the people side. I'm trying to advocating a lot.
I think 2 points that you mentioned. I thought I like it. One is actually introducing AI to friction. Well, I understand the banks are trying to introduce this friction because there are some seniors who may like to see the dial, but actually some of us may not want to see the dial, right? Because when it's fast, because we understand what's happening. So introducing AI to that process to differentiate is a great idea. I think I'd love to have that. And the second point that you emphasize about people, I think many of the panels have spoken about it. In fact, one of the topics that has been addressed, that has been identified in the landscape study paper, is actually educating not just the data protection officers, but actually the wider, the enterprise users, because the application of trust or the application of the principles of trust actually transcends just beyond the IT guys to actually all the other employees. So thanks for the validation. So coming back to you, Lawrence, thanks for sharing your great principles. You are very safe, but how do you protect yourself against some of your weakest links, your partners who are actually working with you?
Yeah, I think when we think about trust, and trust is established when you are always going to be there. It's always on. And it's a matter of when, not a matter of if. There's going to be some impacts. Something will come down, there will be a cyber attack, there will be something. So I think what is important is to be able to recover, to restore the service, to be able to account to your customers when certain things bad happen. Jessie talked about the people culture. I think that's important because everybody would have a responsibility to be accountable to our customers for making sure that if something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, to do that. Of course, when we work with our third-party suppliers, MES has imposed on us a TRM guideline, Technology Risk Management Guidelines. We have to ensure that they are also adopting good practices in their software development. We must have the ability to audit them. We must be assured that they are as good as us when it comes down to deploying some of the services. But we also recognize there will be some impacts that they will have. And again, it shouldn't be a blame culture. It should be a principle of how do we work together to recover as much as possible, as quickly as possible. So I think that's what we do in the bank. Fortunately, we haven't had a major incidents in our banking application, and we want to keep it that way. But we do not think that it will not come. We just have to work very hard to make sure that we stay ahead of the game.
Thanks, Lawrence. I think it's heartening to hear that you're not adopting a blame culture. In fact, earlier this morning, we heard quite a bit about shared responsibility. So I think you are, in a way, practicing some of this shared responsibility, and you talk about accountability, which was emphasized many times by our regulators and our policy guys who are in the panel earlier. So thanks. I think very consistent with what we've been hearing this morning. John, you have the honor of summarizing for us, 2-3 thoughts about
Sure.
trust.
So how can we cement innovation and tech to achieve certain trust? I'll say a few things. First, I think Minister and history have told us reputation, national security are priceless. All of us has a budget. All the cybersecurity, ICT people will tell you, I have a budget. So how much is enough to achieve that trust? So I used to advocate 6%, 8%, 10%. I think today the percentage is higher. If you're not investing enough, I think your security posture, your security layers may not be sufficiently being protected. So if you're a board member, I urge you to take a look at your budget. Now the budget comes with a second problem. Security is to me, is in a 3 dimension. T-1, T equal to 0, T+1. Can you prevent it from happening? Can you detect when it happened and you are known it fast enough? Can you recover from it thereafter? Have you have enough so-called measures in trust for all the 3 layers? In the T-, T equal, and T+, I think many of us always focus about detection. Even the technologies people tell us, you can detect. I think as an ICT professional, if you're sit on the user side, on the buy side, I encourage you to look at the T-, T equal, and T+ in the 3 dimension, using the limited budget that you have to achieve the trust level that you want for your enterprise. I think it's very difficult for you to do that. Priceless, budget, and you have nothing in between. Can you achieve the trust that you're looking for? I think it's going to be hard. So you need to adopt what I call a risk-based approach. Now, the risk-based approach enables you to do calibration. The government come up with a master plan. I urge that you look at the master plan. I urge that you look at people who deal with cybersecurity and privacy a little bit more holistically to achieve the trust. So trust is no longer just cybersecurity. I noted that there's a big market in your paper that talk about maybe more than 50% is on cybersecurity. But I think that the privacy issue is becoming much more prominent in this part of the world. And I think going forward, that could be another 50%. Look at companies who can deal with cybersecurity and privacy a little bit more holistically. Don't just deal with the security element in one piece. Look at banks who have both assurance to you. Look at vendors who can give you assurance for both. That can give you greater sense of assurance, therefore, maybe a better level of trust. Are there many things in the paper that has been published? Wonderful paper. Singapore is probably the center place, as Minister said, it's a platform. Today, Singapore called for about 1.7 billion worth of cybersecurity business, as compared to many years ago, when I counted, was slightly below 1 billion. Singapore GDP in ICT is about 150 to 200 billion now. It's still a very small percentage. It is something that I would urge that the audience that could take back from this panel, small panel, is perhaps have a plan, look at vendors slightly differently, look at the element of trust in a more specific manner. You probably will be able to deal with this trust conditioning a little bit better. Thank you, Philip.
Thanks, John. I think to help us manage our budget, I think we can look forward to more value for money services coming from Huawei.
Well, as a salespeople, I don't. I only spend a few hours with them to ensure they provide the right level.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have run out of time, so thank you, panel, for your valuable insights, and thank you, the audience, for staying till now. Time for lunch.